Disaster Recovery Institute International. DRI International. Disaster Recovery Institute International.
Good morning. I'm Al Berman, Chairman of the Board of DRI International and President of the DRI Foundation. And welcome to day 2 of our Resilient Excellence Summit. We have some great presentations coming up that I know you'll enjoy, and hopefully they will increase your knowledge. Just a short housekeeping note. If you've only registered for days 1 and 2 so far, please go to the conference page and register for tomorrow's session as well. You may apply for 2 CEAPs for each day of the summit for a total of 6. Presentations from the summit will be available for viewing on our website following the initial broadcast. The DRI Foundation is now entering its 11th year. It's important to understand that it's an all-voluntary charitable foundation. There are no paid members or employees for the foundation. Foundation has 5 operating committees, and we'll talk about them today. 1 for veterans, 1 for women in business continuity management, our volunteer committee, our scholarship committee, and our newest committee, the giving committee. Volunteerism is at the heart of what DRI does. We just finished our 11th volunteer operation in Las Vegas for our conference on February 10th. We've been so successful with it that 3 of the last 4 cities we've done in it, the mayor of that city has proclaimed the day DRI Foundation Day for the works that we have done to support different charities within that venue. The Veterans Committee is one of the oldest committees. It's now in its 9th year. It was really formed in 2013, but actually came into operation in 2017. The objective of the committee was to help veterans transition into the profession of emergency response, crisis management, business continuity, disaster recovery, and other resilience processes. We were there to really help those who have done so much to protect us. We figured that the best thing we could do was to provide them with free education, certification, that would lead them to a career in business continuity. And that's what we've tried to do. Over the last 5 years of real operation, we have trained 750 veterans for free. We have not used their GI Bill. We have not asked them for any funding. We've even provided transportation as well as hotels for them if they needed them. You can see a list of some of the employees who now have these veterans as members of their organization. We expect that we will do another 250 this year and probably reach 1,000 mark before the end of the year. If you're interested, you can go to DRI's webpage, or you can actually go to YouTube and put in veterans, and you will find the video by Patricia Heaton. Women in Business Continuity Management is about 5 years old. It's now being supported by the generous contribution from BDO. Its objective was clearly to bring women together to forge a stronger network for them and assist them in advancement in their chosen fields. We explored specific actions and strategies that are unique to women and those trying to enter the field. WBCM now has over 700 members. In 2020, we created a scholarship program very similar to VOP. We've now had 42 recipients. Their scholarships are a little different simply because of circumstances. So not only do we provide them with the education, certification, and help with job placement, but we will also pay for childcare as well as equipment if they need it. The mentor program, which has been in effect for about a year and a half now, has over 100 members, mentees in North America. We've also started a partnership in Brazil with Women in Business Continuity Management in Brazil, and they have 20. In 2022, this year, we've launched WBCM LinkedIn group with over 250 members. I encourage, if you want to enter the field or talk about career advancement, to go to the website to find more information. The DRI Foundation Scholarship was not given last year simply because of the fact that the committee was not able to meet, but this year we are back to giving 2 scholarships for $5,000 each, one for a high school senior and one for an undergraduate. Requirements are that their parent or legal guardian must be a certified professional in good standing. Application period is open now, will run through the end of May. And if you go to DRI's website and look at scholarship award, you'll be able to apply for the scholarship. Giving has become one of the issues that DRI has. We have made donations around the world to different organizations, and you can take a look at the map. This one is a little outdated. It doesn't have Ukraine in it, which we've made some substantial donations this year. We have done it in places like Sierra Leone, in India, certainly in the United States, Midwest US tornado relief this year. During COVID, we supported over 40 different food banks and healthcare organizations by making donations to them. These were directed donations with a lot of help from our staff and some of the people on our board to try to help us find the right organizations to make donations. But today I'm asking you for your help. No, not to donate money, although that would be nice. That's not the issue we are facing. What we are really facing is the ability to react quickly under the circumstances that affect communities and organizations, to help us find the right organizations to support. We have a committee now, a base committee of about 4 people, but we certainly need help in identifying local places to make donations. And the reason for that is we really want to make it for local organizations so that we can have an immediate effect. The Red Cross and organizations like that do a great job, but don't have the immediate ability to reach into the smaller pockets in times of a disaster. So we're asking you to help form regional committees to identify local charities who are helping others. This could include local charities that provide shelter, food, clothing, and other essentials during and after disasters. It could be local emergency responders who have helped during a disaster. We've supported LA firefighter stations during the fires in LA last year, but we've also sent emergency response teams, as well as to police and other security organizations. But clearly, we don't know as much as you do about your own neighborhood. We've supported local food banks, and you've seen an example of some of those, and other organizations who may think need our help. The only qualifications they have, and these are only US qualifications, is they're a domestic organization recognized as 501c3 by the Internal Revenue Service, or they're a recognized religious institution. So if they meet any of those qualifications, we want to help them at times of emergency. If you're interested, and please, we need your help, please contact me at aberman@drii.org. And thank you for your time. If you need any more information about the foundation, you can go to foundation.drii.org. Thank you and enjoy the conference.
For today's keynote, please welcome Robyn Kimbro, MBCP. As Senior Manager of Enterprise Business Continuity, she is responsible for BCP governance and strategic direction, risk management, program metrics and reporting, and provides guidance and support to business continuity managers in the planning and maintenance of Walmart's global business continuity programs. She also supports Walmart's Global Emergency Operations Center in crisis response efforts as its most critical business areas across the globe. Thanks for being with us this morning, Robyn.
Hi, my name is Robyn Kimbro, and I'm very excited to be with you today as a speaker at the DRI 2022 Resilience Excellence Summit. Just to give you a little background about me, I've been in the industry for 22 years and received my first certification through DRI in 2004 as a certified business continuity professional. I currently hold 2 certifications, a Master Business Continuity Professional and a Certified Cyber Resilience Professional. Throughout my professional career, I've developed, established, implemented, and maintained business continuity and risk management programs. I've led business impact analysis and risk assessments, developed recovery strategies, business continuity and crisis management plans, conducted exercises of those plans, and also assisted with response and recovery efforts for significant disruptions, including Hurricane Katrina in 2005. For the last 15 years, my role has focused on program governance and strategic direction for those same programs. My objective for today is to share with you at a very high level some practical learnings from my experience in keeping the program relevant to the ever-changing risk landscape and strategic direction of the business. So with that, welcome to my session. My session for today is, so you have an established, mature program. Now what? That's a great question, isn't it? When you think about program relevancy, it's really about rejuvenation. How do we keep the momentum and the energy level high year after year in a way that is not just perceived as checking the box to meet a compliance requirement? We do that by thinking outside of the box, simplifying processes as much as possible without jeopardizing the integrity of the data that we collect. It's likewise important to keep up on industry best practices and standards and keep up with what is going on in the news and supply chain and the ever-changing risk and threat landscape. When you think about program relevancy, it's really about rejuvenation. How do we keep the momentum and energy level high year after year in a way that is not perceived as just checking a box to meet compliance requirements? We do that by thinking outside of the box, by simplifying processes as much as possible without jeopardizing the integrity of the data that we collect. It's likewise important to keep up on industry best practices and standards. Keep up with what's going on in the news, the supply chain, and with the ever-changing risk and threat landscape. This is an important piece of program maturity because we all have one goal in mind, and that is to keep our company resilient in the face of any disruptions to the business. As practitioners in this industry, we're always challenged to think about the big picture and beyond, to think outside of the box, plan for the future in preparation for change. Have you established a vision and strategic plan for the program? Do you have clarity on where the program is going long-term? It can't stay stagnant. It needs to grow with the organization and evolve. The roadmap you'll create from the vision and strategy sets that in motion and lets you see the progress you're making. As an example, if your vision for the program is organizational resilience or enterprise resilience, you'll need to establish short and long-term goals to get there. Show where you are today and where you want to be at the end of the roadmap. The roadmap represents the clear direction, and it gives you the ability to measure how you will get there. It can be used to clearly articulate your vision, which is the end result, and the strategy, which is how you will get there. It can also create excitement within your organization and the future you envision for the program. Think of it like architecting a big, beautiful building with all the amenities to get people excited about coming to work in that building every single day. You'll need to think through the activities and the milestones required for both short and long-term goals. Break it down into logical and accomplishable goals and priorities. Think about resources required. Do you need to bring in experts from other parts of the company to help? Do you need additional headcount, or is any type of funding required? Be sure that you report on the progress on a regular basis. And don't worry if you have to make changes. Milestones and goals will have to change if you have bumps in the road. How is resilience, business continuity, and crisis management planning viewed in your organization? Is it an annual check the box, or is it ingrained in everyday activities? Having a solid marketing plan helps to create communication channels, identify the target audience, and can be used to help develop future strategies. It also gives you an opportunity to highlight some of the strategies for your program, and also to get the word out to other organizations that may not be familiar with your program and how it benefits their organization, promoting awareness. Some of the areas to focus on in that marketing plan are communications. Are your communications effective? Are they hitting the right audience? Are they insightful and streamlined? Not too frequent, but frequent enough to spark interest and keep your target audience informed. Educational lunch and learns. These are voluntary meetings, training and awareness, or presentations during the lunch hour. It can be a brown bag, or perhaps your organization might spring for pizza to be brought in. This is a great, inexpensive way to bring people in from all areas across the organization in an informal environment that is collaborative and promotes learning. What a great way to market your program, right? Program videos. This is an easy, strategic way to create short educational videos about the program. You'll need to have a topic and decide how you want to structure it. Keep in mind that it might be seen by people that are new to the program or don't know much about business continuity or resilience. Workplace by Facebook. This is a platform that can support team messaging and communications and creates an online community. You can have live feed sessions on Workplace, and it also really promotes the education of the program to a broader audience. Utilize your SharePoint, Teams, or any type of knowledge-based site as a centralized location to promote and share the program. Collaborate with different areas throughout the organization to increase the knowledge of resilience. With a marketing strategy, you're creating an educational foundation about the program and sharing expertise. When you think about building internal partnerships and why it's important, we all tend to work in silos. Building partnerships helps you break down those silos. You're building that community and bridging gaps in your knowledge base. We aren't experts in all areas, and we need help or advice at times from the people that really are the experts. Building those relationships gives you that expertise to pull from to provide new perspectives and ways of thinking. You can also use these partnerships to help you achieve your program's strategic roadmap that we talked about a little bit earlier. Building strong relationships with other orgs within your company builds trusts and allows you to lead by influence. When we talk about organizational resilience, it takes many other business areas within an organization to help achieve that ultimate goal of resilience. The Enterprise Risk Management Organization, they provide a holistic view across the organization of risks, what is important to the company. This can help you drive your strategies and can also help you drive your training and awareness of enterprise resilience. Legal and compliance. This organization provides guidance to the company to support the organization on compliance with laws, regulations, and internal procedures. Information technology disaster recovery. These are the experts on technology and recovery requirements. The data you collect on the business side feeds information to this organization for critical technology requirements for the execution of your critical business functions. Internal audit can share insight on audit findings and things that may need special attention or things you should consider in resilience planning. Information security. What is this organization seeing in the areas of security and cyber threats? You might talk with them and understand what they're planning for and what you can include in your resilience planning and some of your exercise scenarios. Corporate affairs, this is the public-facing communications organization. This group is ensuring appropriate communications are ready to utilize and that teams understand how to engage corporate affairs during disruptions. The last thing you want is an employee talking about the company when you're in the middle of a disruption and trying to recover. Build those partnerships to have the open channel of communication and build transparency and trust within your organization. Consider benchmarking with industry peers. What do I mean when I say benchmarking? I'm talking about benchmarking best practices, program metrics, or tools. Benchmarking your business continuity program with other business continuity peers can be beneficial and can help you further mature your program. There are obviously things that you can and cannot divulge, like data, gaps in your program, or anything like that. So be sure that you're talking to your leadership before agreeing to do any benchmarking, and that you set clear parameters about what will be benchmarked and discussed. You can also do internal benchmarking with other organizations within your company. Use those relationships that we just talked about to possibly benchmark how they execute their programs, what kind of tools they're using, and how they compile their metrics. You can have very insightful conversations through benchmarking, and it's a great way to collaborate with other peers in your organization and share best practices. Regular program reviews are critical to highlight the accomplishments of the program. You can also use these reviews to highlight roadblocks or assistance needed to overcome any type of obstacle. These should be done at least annually, preferably semi-annually if possible. By sharing program statistics, metrics, and key activities being accomplished, you can obtain feedback and understand expectations they may have for how the program is meeting objectives. Be sure that you set a clear agenda for those reviews so that each time you meet, you can report on progress made from the last review. An example of a clear agenda might be overall health of the program over the last 6 months versus the previous 6 months. You can highlight risks and mitigations established, and if those risks have been reduced or increased over the last 6 months versus the previous 6 months. You can also highlight any new risks identified, report on the number of exercises conducted or the number of disruptions. Having these program reviews allows for leadership awareness, clear communication, and it helps facilitate any changes to the program. It also establishes that trust. You have the ability to influence the direction of the program through the trust and confidence that you build with your leadership. Let's talk a little bit about program requirements. Thinking about program requirements and industry standards. While your organization may not be regulated or required to adhere by applicable regulations, a good practice for compliance is mapping your business continuity program requirements to industry standards and regulations. Some of the standards to consider are International Standard ISO 22301, which covers preparation for and responding and recovering from disruptive events. There's also ISO 22313, which gives guidance on applying business continuity management system referred to in ISO 22301. There's also NIST cybersecurity framework, which provides guidance for organizations on managing and responding and reducing cybersecurity risks. All three of these are great frameworks and regulations to use for program requirements. Having this mapping to accepted methodology provides a credible reference point for your program requirements and those outputs. Conduct annual surveys with your stakeholders and key contributors of the program. It doesn't have to be a long survey, maybe 4 or 5 pointed questions on how the process is working. You could also include questions on your tool and the functionality. Resilience planning milestones are often completed by employees that aren't professionals in the industry. So our job is to ensure that they have the appropriate understanding of the why, the how, the what, the tools, the guidance documentation, instruction, and in consultation from us as professionals to accomplish the work. When you think about what you want to get out of the survey, be very clear with your questions and make sure they are applicable to the audience you're surveying. You can ask questions related to the program effectiveness, the ease of maintaining the program, the support received. Are they receiving adequate support from the business resilience team, from their organization? Are the metrics clear? And are the metrics driving actions? If not, what recommendations do they have? Surveys are an easy way to get feedback and can help determine how well your program is functioning. We all know sometimes it's tough to get people to fill out surveys. We can't always use incentives to get responses, but what we can say is we want your feedback, we need your feedback, and we're very interested in what you have to say, good or bad. We want to know what's working and what's not working. I prefer to not make surveys anonymous because I want to follow up personally. I want to reach out to them and say, hey, thank you for taking the time to fill out the survey. We got your feedback, we appreciate it, and here's what we're going to do about it. When you ask a stakeholder to fill out a survey, take action and report on the action. If you show that you're taking action, they are more apt to provide feedback for future surveys. And be sure that you don't ask them the same questions year after year. Change those survey questions based on how the program has changed. Evaluate your program tools on a regular basis. This is invaluable to ensure that the program is effective and is part of continuous improvement. When you're providing a resource to stakeholders and teams that are actually executing the program requirements, you want to ensure that the tools are as good as they can be and relevant to how the program matures and changes. Make sure that your sites are easily accessible and easy to navigate. If you've had the same tools and the same knowledge base for several years, it's okay to do a site overhaul from time to time. Let's talk about quality assurance. Why is a quality assurance program important? You're using the data and information collected from all of the requirements of the program, the business impact analysis, the risk assessment, dependency analysis, gaps identified, exercises, and corrective actions. All of this feeds into your metrics and reporting. There should be checks and balances to validate that that information is accurate. Build a QA model that holds teams accountable to the data that's being collected and conduct regularly scheduled reviews of that data. When you quality assurance check the data, make sure that you choose just a random selection of business areas and report out on the quality of the data they're collecting. You're looking for incomplete or inconsistencies in data. If supporting documentation hasn't been supplied to validate that a milestone has been completed, or if appropriate approvals have not been obtained for exercise documentation and validation of the type of exercise that was conducted, things might be questioned in the event of an audit. Produce a report with the results and work with the teams to correct the deficiencies. This will ensure that the integrity of the data you are reporting in your metrics for the company is accurate and validated. So let's talk a little bit about the metrics and reporting. Reporting regularly allows stakeholders to understand the health of the program. It can also help the organization decide if they should invest more in resilience planning. It allows for proactive risk management and highlights any risk uncovered throughout the assessments and exercises. Some key metric areas to consider in your reporting is compliance. Are all organizations in compliance to the annual program requirements? If not, why not? Is this a resource issue or is this a funding issue? What are each organization's critical risks and what are the mitigations in place? This gives each organization an opportunity to review risk holistically, and if there are common risks, leadership can agree on what the right course of action is. An example might be a common resilience across the company for a critical third party. Should an alternate critical third party be established? How recoverable is an organization as a whole? Are exercises being conducted regularly? Are the scenarios increasing in complexity? Are the plans being updated? Are the corrective actions being closed out? Those are the types of things that should be surfaced in your metrics and reporting. You're looking for things to drive action. Some additional areas to consider, depending on the size of your program and the number of critical processes and RTOs, are the number of plans, the number of exercises you conduct. Does this equate to more resources needed to run the program or more investment? Those key things give a view of organizational resilience and helps to determine if risks are appropriately identified. Is the company fully prepared to respond to disruptions and recover quickly? Okay, the last thing I want to talk to you about today is a robust maintenance program. So when you think about maintenance, it's a huge component of maturity and a successful program. You spent the time and effort getting everyone on board and getting assessments completed, your documentation developed, your plans built and exercised, and there has to be a high level of continuous improvement and continuous maintenance to make sure that all aspects of data and information is validated regularly and updated year after year. We all know that elements can change frequently. Likewise, plan elements change. Personnel changes happen, and that can happen through reorgs, or it can happen through changing of roles and people moving to other companies for other positions. So technology changes as well, supply chain changes, and also critical dependencies within the organization for technology and other aspects must also be reviewed and validated. There has to be a mechanism in place to review all of the different elements on a regular basis. So depending on the dynamics of your organization, this could be quarterly, it could be semi-annually, or it could be annually. Agree on a maintenance schedule and set timelines and expectations at the beginning of every year and get those on the calendar. Or if you have a dynamic business continuity tool, maybe you could set reminders in the tool to kick off those communications. Be sure you give plenty of notice. I would say, 90, 60, 30-day reminders. Thinking about risk identification and mitigation, make sure any new risks identified and those mitigations are documented. We talked about building that relationship a little earlier with the enterprise risk management organization. Use that relationship as part of the maintenance program to see if there are any new risks identified that might affect critical business functions or processes, and discuss those with your teams and make sure that those are accounted for in recovery strategies and plans. So moving on to exercises. Create as many different scenarios that you can to challenge the way your teams respond. Exercise the various scenarios that you know are critical to your business, such as what is your communication strategy if there is a widespread loss of communications? How does the company respond to significant power outages in the region? How would the company respond to a significant cyber attack to technology or company information? What are the implications of a long-term supply chain issue? How would significant civil unrest affect the company and an employee's ability to get to work? Changing weather patterns, what happens during significant weather event? Take those scenarios and build a robust exercise that challenges the way teams think and respond. Throw some injects in there that totally shifts the scenario into a different direction. Exercise those scenarios very well, not just plan walkthroughs or discussions. Perform actual simulation of response strategies. Pay attention to after actions or corrective actions. Make sure that there's a diligent follow-up to get them closed out and that plans are updated and redistributed. The last thing that you want is for a corrective action to be hanging out there for a long time and then go to conduct another exercise and have the very same corrective action pop up as a gap. Or worse than that, what if you have a real disruption and that gap causes a delay in your response, in your recovery, and it's already showed up in previous exercises? I've been asked before, what are some of the challenges I've experienced with establishing a solid maintenance program, which is a really good question. I'd have to say the top for me is getting time and resources. Sometimes business continuity and crisis planning is considered a one and done, and it's not. Risks evolve, strategies change, and plans change. Getting people accountable to sit down and take that time and effort to validate the information regularly, as well as making the time to conduct the robust, meaningful exercises with impactful scenarios is an ongoing challenge. And I've addressed that in the past by using my relationships with executive sponsors and senior leaders to reinforce the importance of keeping the program maintained from the top down. That message is helpful, and it's a hammer that you can use to drive the importance of getting these people together, or getting folks together, I should say, to do these refreshes. I don't like to escalate at all, but if I do run into a time and a resource issue that I haven't been able to solve on my own, and I've been very diligent in my requests, you know, I have had to escalate before to get the focus. So when you think about the onset of COVID a couple of years ago, that really sparked a fire in organizations to take a look at their pandemic plan. And many organizations viewed that scenario as something that was a low risk, low likelihood event. But it was happening at that very moment in 2020. And it caused organizations to really look at their plan, to make adjustments and alternate work strategies for employees, and also ways to continue to conduct their business in light of some supply chain issues that also developed out of the pandemic. Now that things have leveled out and we're returning to an office environment, I see that focus starting to shift a little bit in some areas of resilience planning. There are still a lot of risk out there that drives the business continuity planning, like supply chain challenges, cybersecurity threats, the weather events we've had over the past year, civil unrest, and other things of that nature. And we need to continue to be diligent in our planning efforts and risk spotting and driving awareness throughout our organization. So in closing the session for today, you've already established the need of resilience planning. You've obtained your support. You have the funding, the policy, the framework, the standard and guidance, and you've educated your teams on the basic concept of resilience planning. The basis of ongoing maturity for your program is a strong program governance structure and a robust maintenance program. Both of these are key to driving the resilience message across all organizations. Thank you very much for your time today. I hope that you enjoy the rest of the summit, and I hope you have a wonderful day.
As part of the Resilience Excellence Summit, we're shining a spotlight on the recipients of this year's Awards of Excellence. We announced them at DRI 2022 in Las Vegas in February, and we're happy to have the winners here with us for the recognition they so richly deserve. Today, we're hearing from the award winners picked by their peers, DRI's certified professional community via online voting, Product and Service Provider of the Year, and Lifetime Achievement. The Lifetime Achievement Award recognizes experienced industry professionals for career-defining work in resilience. This year's deserving recipient is Michelle Turner, MBCP, who is active in the DRI community on the Board of Directors and the DRI Foundation Giving Committee.
Hello, my name is Michelle Turner, and I am the 2022 recipient of the Lifetime Achievement Award sponsored by Disaster Recovery Institute International. That is a mouthful, and I am humbled to be able to receive this honor. This award means a lot to me, primarily because it was provided to me by you, my colleagues, my peers. I am appreciative that you are appreciative of what I've been able to do within the industry for almost 30 years or so. It means a lot to be able to provide insight and leadership in an industry where not only are we providing assistance with organizations and being able to recover from business interruptions, but being able to provide support for individuals, for the priorities within the business continuity arena, priorities being our employees, life safety. So again, thank you for this absolutely wonderful honor.
Recognizing the best products and services developed for the business continuity practitioner, the Product and Service Provider of the Year award is for companies committed to promoting business continuity to both their core customer base and a wider consumer market. This year, DRI certified professionals across all industry sectors voted for Fusion Risk Management. Speaking on its behalf is Fusion CEO Mike Campbell.
Hi, I'm Mike Campbell. I'm the CEO of Fusion Risk Management. The team here at Fusion would like to graciously thank the Disaster Recovery Institute International for recognizing Fusion this year as the Product and Service Provider of the Year in their 2022 Awards of Excellence. This win is truly a testament to Fusion's commitment to providing best-in-class products and services that help our clients achieve their North Star of resilience. Many of us have been through massive disruptions over the last 2 years, and that's highlighted the growing importance of operational resilience. We here at Fusion will continue to work with our clients to push the possibilities of resilience through any disruption, while also ensuring that we remain compliant. Thank you again to DRI International for this very impressive recognition. We are extremely humbled and honored, and know that this will help Fusion continue to make great strides in the industry. Thank you all.
Join us tomorrow to hear from the rest of our award recipients. For this afternoon's presentation, we'd like to welcome Peter Morris, IT Service Continuity Management Expert and Operational Resilience in Group Security with AXA Group International UK Limited. Peter embarked on his journey with disaster recovery, business continuity, and now operational resilience over 20 years ago. Today, he will offer his observations on crisis events and from his experience comment on what connects them, how their impact ripples across the world, and their consequences. Peter, the floor is yours.
Hello everyone, and thank you for viewing this presentation. The title of my talk today is Distant Lands of Which We Know Little. The reason for this title will be explained a little further on, but for those of you I've not yet met, please let me introduce myself. My name is Peter Morris, and you know it feels kind of strange when I think about it, but I've been involved in disaster recovery in one form or another for close to 40 years. Firstly, by supporting disaster recovery exercises in an IT technical role. I then ended up organising and running the exercises, and this was followed by 20 plus years working in business continuity for UK national and international operations, and now I believe in the next iteration of business continuity, which is operational resilience. Currently, I work as a Group Operational Resilience Officer for AXA, which is a French multinational insurance company headquartered in Paris. But today, like the last 2 years, I'm working in my home in the UK. I've chaired the IBM's UK Business Continuity and Recovery Services user group and participated in the retail and insurance sector business continuity groups. As a side note, if there are any continuity or resilience groups local to you, I would really encourage you to consider joining them. I have found them to be a great source of information and shared experiences. And if nothing else, they confirm you are part of a large, diverse, global profession and not actually going mad. I'm thrilled you could join me. So what am I going to talk about? As I've mentioned earlier, the title of this presentation is Distant Lands of Which We Know Little. This paraphrases a former UK Prime Minister, Neville Chamberlain. But in essence, I'm talking metaphorically about the things that we shy away from fully considering, or physically about real events having downstream consequences which impact our organisations in ways we didn't anticipate. Firstly, I'm going to make some personal observations on recent and impactful events, and then I'll look at what connections they have, and I'm going to explore how seemingly remote incidents can ripple into our lives, the possible consequences of these incidents, and finally, I'd like to share some new thinking with you, which may help you prepare for and deal with incidents when they arrive. In typical teacher format, I'll be posing a few questions along the way for you to consider. So let's get into some of these personal observations. Firstly, and yes, you knew it had to be here, pandemic. I'd like to think this is a subject which we all have had some experience in recently. And forgive me, because I'm going to labour on this point slightly, but I believe it is such a rich case study with some important messages emerging from the crisis which are relevant to all of our organisations. So here's the thing, a brief history lesson. Communicable diseases of one form or another have been high on the World Health Organization risk list since its inception. In fact, even prior to the formation of the World Health Organization, when it was just the International Sanitary Conference, which convened, funnily enough, in Paris in 1851, they were there discussing the standardization of international quarantine regulations against the spread of cholera, plague and yellow fever. However, more recently, we've had several of what I would call pandemic warnings. Bird flu, swine flu, severe acute respiratory syndrome, which you might know as SARS, and Middle Eastern respiratory syndrome, which you know as MERS. All of these are either infectious influenzas or coronavirus. I'm now going to ask you some of those questions. With COVID-19, did we really understand the signals? Wuhan was a long way away for some. Did we believe it would blow out like the other flus? And once we did realise what we were dealing with, what was our speed of reaction? For me, in the UK, our government seemed slow to start, but once awakened, like many other countries, it quickly implemented lockdown restrictions, and once available, it deployed a national vaccination response, and now with a booster programme. This means that after 2 years, we're slowly awakening from our COVID nightmare. However, I feel the financial implications of this have yet to be fully realised. So now, we've had some time to reflect on our last 2 years. What did our 2018-19 pandemic plans look like? Did they account for what we experienced from 2020 onwards? What did your exercises tell you? In the UK, there were 2 national pandemic exercises held in 2016. The first, in February, was Operation Alice. It was commissioned by the UK National Health Service, and the scenario was a simulation of a large-scale outbreak of Middle Eastern respiratory syndrome, MERS. The post-Alice exercise report noted that during the simulation, the level and use of personal protection equipment was central to the exercise dialogue, and that the pandemic stockpiles were suggested to ensure sufficient quantities would be available. Other suggested measures included point-of-entry screening to restrict the spread of virus from overseas, and for officials to draw up options plans with cost benefits for quarantine versus self-isolation for a range of contact types, including symptomatic, asymptomatic, and high-risk groups. Officials also recommended developing a plan for the process of community sampling and emphasised the need to develop a tool or a system to trace contacts of people who have been infected by the virus, suggesting a live database of contacts with classifications, current state, and other data relevant to the situation. Remember, this was 2016. In October of the same year, a second exercise, Cygnus, was run by Public Health England to estimate the impact of a hypothetical H2N2 influenza pandemic on the UK, named Swan Flu. The scenario placed the participants in the 7th week of a pandemic, effectively at the peak of the crisis, when there would be the greatest demand for healthcare. At this stage, an estimated 50% of the population had been infected, with close to 400,000 deaths. The hypothetical situation was that the vaccine had been made and purchased, but not yet delivered to the United Kingdom. The findings of this exercise fell into 4 categories. First was a need for centralised operation. Feedback showed that the organisations varied in preparedness, with some relying on corporate memory and others depending on outdated, missing or incomplete individual pandemic protocols. There were also demonstrations of silo planning between and within some organisations, which had different levels of detail and structure, and which could not be corresponded well when used simultaneously. Second was the easing of regulations. There was a proposal to consider rolling back health sector legislation and regulatory restrictions. This was seen to aid management of essential services and meeting healthcare demands with fewer obstacles, especially when the situations were evolving quickly and decisions need to be made as soon as possible. Key suggestions were for rules to be more malleable and easily adapted to the circumstances at hand. Thirdly, a need to understand and manage public reaction. This represented something of a challenge to the exercise, as exercise Cygnus was centred around assumptions of public response which were yet to be validated. Expectations of how the public would react were based on the magnitude of swan flu. This was not considered to be entirely representative of what would have happened in real life. It was stated that moral decisions, such as those involving mass burials or population triage, may differ in the face of public reaction. It was recognised further work was required to understand public reaction, so it was factored into significant decisions and communication strategies developed, particularly for ethically charged scenarios. Finally, meeting the demand for services. A lack of resources and limited ability to increase supply in the face of demand was identified. This directly impacted on how emergency plans could be operated at a local level and led to the call of a revision of the central operating planning. Little tactical coordination was observed when the need for services outweighed the capacity for local responders. The need for more precise protocols was identified to guide healthcare providers at an operational level should there be a need to drastically step up local response. A suggestion was to implement planning at a regional level to improve coordination across multiple local agencies. Logistically, it was identified a need for more health workers and resources such as ventilators, personal protective equipment, and hospital beds were required to face the pressure and widespread impact of a pandemic. Local resilience forums announced that they depended upon subject matter experts for more complicated aspects of pandemic response. Doubts were raised if this method was suitable in case of a fast-moving pandemic, since these experts would be called on to aid more than one strategic coordination group. On reflection, several of these action plans identified in these exercises later emerged as weaknesses in the UK response to COVID-19 in 2020, with the government being criticised for poor coordination, shortage of personal protection equipment in care homes and hospitals, continuing to allow people to enter the UK without being screened, and failing to launch a test and trace service until May 2020, more than 2 months after the peak of the first wave of the pandemic. Do any of these findings feel familiar to you? Understanding what's going on, high demand for limited services, a need for effective and central tactical coordination, management of communications and public perception, incomplete or out-of-date documentation, and reliance on a limited number of outsourced subject matter experts. I wish this was an in-person presentation, as I would now ask for a show of hands for the next 2 questions. Did anyone anticipate more than 2 years in their planning? And if you did, you were indeed prescient. Did anyone anticipate the anti-vax demonstrators and the level of pushback which we got from parts of our communities? There were, in fact, distant alarm bells ringing. Were we choosing not to listen? Let's move on to another topic, which has been in the news recently. Yes, this is another one that had to be on the list. Climate. Okay, so let's reel off a few of the events around the world which have been laid at the door of climate change. Droughts, crop failures, flooding events in Europe, Australia and China, wildfires in Australia and America, tropical cyclones in Asia, tornadoes in America, and ice cap loss. The United Nations have recently published their climate reports. If you've had the opportunity to read it, and I recommend that you do, I think you would agree it makes pretty sobering reading. And to quote, widespread, pervasive impacts to ecosystems, people, settlements and infrastructure have resulted from observed increases in the frequency and intensity of climate and weather extremes. It seems we are indeed at an 11th hour moment for the Earth. Now, we could take up the rest of the day discussing this, but I'll focus on flooding as a broad example. Many of the world's cities are based either on a river or by the sea, and some both. Historically, this has been to facilitate trade and commerce. However, this now represents a substantial risk. Flooding losses exceed $10 billion in individual major flooding events. This is second only to earthquakes regarding to financial loss. Flooding risks emanating from both river and ocean flooding is increasing globally. So why is this? Well, global warming has increased the frequency and intensity of heavy precipitation. It's increased the intensity of tropical cyclones, which means those rated above 3 to 5 in their category, which can create storm surges. Urbanization has played its part, increasing mean and heavy precipitation over and downwind of cities. This has resulted in increased runoff intensity from areas which cannot absorb these increased rainfall, such as built-up areas, car parks, and roads. In coastal cities, the combination of more frequent extreme sea level events due to sea level rise and storm surge, combined with extreme rainfall and river flow events, will make flooding more probable. So what does this mean? Well, it breaks down into 4 different areas. Loss of lives and assets, risks to food security, and economic disruption due to the destruction of settlements and infrastructure. Loss of infrastructure and economic disruption due to floods, landslides, sea level rise, storm surges, and coastal erosion. This is sometimes known as compound flooding. Risk of degradation of marine, coastal, and terrestrial ecosystems, including loss of biodiversity. You may ask, why is this important? Well, it's because mangroves and coral reefs provide protection against coastal flooding. And just when you thought we had finished with the health issues, climate change comes along with its own severe health effects due to the increase of what are now called vector-borne diseases, such as dengue fever, yellow fever, West Nile fever, and Zika. Let's move on now to something which I believe we are all feeling. Energy. I imagine you're all painfully aware of the cost of energy in all its forms has recently spiraled. This is impacting first world countries in the pockets of its population, but it is devastating third world countries with sudden and sustained shocks. Businesses can't dodge these increases. They are reliant on energy in one form or another to run their operation, from bakers to bankers, dentists to delivery companies. Whilst this current energy crisis is accelerating investment in renewable and alternative options for energy generation in countries which can afford these programs, and producing a drive to reduce dependence on fossil-based energy. However, these alternatives have a very long lead time. In the meantime, the likely immediate consequence are increased costs, business closures, financial stress, unemployment, and increased poverty. The legacy of this crisis is likely to be prolonged. Of course, On the flip side of this accelerated reduction in fossil fuel dependence is the impact on countries and communities whose economies are primarily based on extraction and sale of these commodities. History has shown these groups will struggle to realign their revenue streams, causing a realignment of the world economies. With our energy dependence and its vulnerability has sat unresolved for a number of years, we are now all feeling our dependence and our vulnerability amplified by recent events in Eastern Europe. This fits the disaster billing perfectly. Something we didn't expect, but could have anticipated, will take a long time to fix and be costly to do so. The challenges ahead are formidable. Let's now move on to some observations of our time. Cyber. If the last 2 years have shown us anything, it's an increased dependence we all have on IT-based services. From our streaming service subscriptions, our online purchasing addiction, and of course this, working from home. At the lowest level, there were local shops and restaurants which suddenly switched to being online cashless delivery operations seemingly overnight. Larger businesses had to deal with the challenges of wholesale change in operations with all or nearly all of its workforce working from home simultaneously. Whilst this switch is a credit to the teams involved that it was pulled off at all, it did present an opportunity for the more criminally inclined. Cyber attacks on our businesses and countries' infrastructure are undoubtedly on the increase. Originally, this was solely the territory of state-sponsored activity, and whilst they still do play a part in these attacks, it's no longer the sole domain of rogue states, but rather has become a dark web industry. You no longer need to be a script junkie. Attack tools are widely available as a purchasable service. On the dark web, with a stolen credit card or bitcoins, you can launch an attack by selecting what you want from a menu. DDoS as a service, ransomware as a service. Not only can single attacks be damaging, but cyber attacks are increasingly being used in a blended format, with one or more attacks being used as distractions whilst the attacker deploys another, more dangerous payload. Cyber attacks, more often than not, are visible to your customers, in many countries reportable to your regulators, disruptive, brand damaging, and like I said, worryingly on the increase. Now, more than ever, there is a need for increased scrutiny of the governance of our personal and business IT security practices, as they could just save the day. Shields up, as they say. Right, let's have another look at some recent newsworthy events in our supply chains. It's not news to say that catastrophic incidents can significantly disrupt your supply chains. But fortunately, pre-2020, most of these disruptions remained localized. And it was not until the onset of COVID-19 that disruption achieved a truly global magnitude. With governments around the world resorting to closing borders, shutting down manufacturing plants and imposing lockdowns to contain the virus, the effects of these measures became clearly visible in the global transport networks. We saw disruptions first clustered over Asia, and then these soon rippled along the main trade routes and served as a precursor to the disruptions in the broader economy. With widespread adoption of just-in-time production strategies, along with a global search for cost reductions by moving production operations around the world, means we have become increasingly sensitive to slowdowns or interruptions to delivery schedules. chips used in vehicles, sea and land distribution networks, food distribution, commodity distribution, all impacted directly or indirectly. Full resumption of these transport networks post-COVID has been slow due to staffing shortages and vessels being held up in ports or in the wrong part of the world. The full effect of supply chain interruption cannot be underestimated. The blockage in the Suez Canal log-jammed over 400 vehicles, and over the 6 days that the Evergreen was stuck, cost approximately $54 billion in trade loss, which amounts to about 12% of global trade. Whilst this event did not result in any port closures, the downstream impacts meant container gateways in Europe and Southeast Asia, started to experience congestion due to the large number of simultaneously arriving vessels following the blockage. At the same time, empty containers were held for longer than usual at European ports, exacerbating the scarcity of containers at Asian export gateways and promoting ocean carriers to cut short port stays in Europe to quickly reposition equipment back to Asia. This exemplifies the connected and independent nature of our businesses, how long our supply chains are, and the need for your organisation to fully understand them. Let's now look at how all these observations start to connect. There are several common elements to all of our observations. Firstly, most of them have an unexpected quotient, arriving at our door without warning or having unanticipated effects. The level of our readiness, shall we say, has been less than optimal. Many of these events have lasted longer than expected and had intensity which we've never seen before. For some, these events have happened simultaneously, compounding the pressures on an organisation and proving experiencing one disaster does not make you immune from other disasters. The impact of crises is larger and ranges wider than ever before. Recovery from these events has taken longer and cost more than anticipated. Remember that $10 billion per flooding event? Given the increase in frequency and intensity of some of these events, you may question, is this the new normal? The answer is quite possibly yes. So let's talk about how these ripple together and into our lives. As we've seen with ever more interconnected world, the disruption of something far away and seemingly disconnected from your business may in fact be only a few degrees of separation away from you. I remember once hearing the phrase, the supplier of your supplier has to be known to you. Each of my observations I've spoken about have had downstream consequences from commodity shortages, staffing shortages, delivery delays, impacting construction, manufacturing, financial services, hospitality, sport, entertainment. The list goes on. As a current example, we are seeing how wheat production shortages have caused spiralling commodity price increases, with some countries unable to tolerate the increases and forcing them to use financial reserves to protect their citizens. The accompanying impact on employment has caused hardship for many. All this can impact on confidence in your brand or company and see competitive allegiances development, which may have a negative impact on your business. One thing leads to another, as they say. So let's now have a look at the consequences of these crises. With all types of disruption, there are consequences. some immediate, some long-term, some expected, and definitely some not. With all disruptions, there is likely to be a period of instability, where what has happened is assessed and understood. This instability can breed nervousness in your customers, suppliers, or financiers. This is referred to as infection, and the medical analogy is quite apt. The actions and perceptions of businesses recovering from crises, regardless of the actual cause, may result in polarization of customers and suppliers. This can permanently damage a brand and take a long time to recover from. If you want to see a recent example of this, Google UK ferry strike and you will find the case in point. Crises can cause shortage of items or perversely oversupply, as was seen with the fuel in the height of the COVID pandemic. What tends to happen is an increase in poverty as the poorest individuals and countries struggle to adapt to rapid changes. Pressure on the least able to respond to the fallout of crisis can lead them to seek reparation against those perceived to have caused it. This can be directed at governments, businesses, or individuals. This can, in some situations, lead to civil unrest. This is why it's essential to learn fast from your incidents, improve your planning and your documentation, and to evaluate those best case and worst case scenarios as part of your planning and during your crisis response. Okay. I'm going to stop being Mr. Doom and Gloom now, and I'd like to share with you some new thinking for you to consider. Very early on in my career, I remember a good friend and business continuity mentor suggesting I should never die from a lack of imagination, meaning I should always consider how could this get worse, both in the thick of a crisis and when planning. Could you run out of raw products and components? Could you lose access to your premises for a long time? How will you avoid the loss of colleagues as they reassess their lives post-COVID? I think we have seen in all the observations I've chosen where potentially a little bit more imagination may have lessened the impact or duration of an event. However, let's consider some new methods of thinking. For all of us, I believe it should be our mission to have an organisation fit to effectively anticipate, adapt, and respond to simultaneous threats, incidents, and crises. To be able to learn fast and regenerate by developing a sustainable resilience capability, all of which would enable your organisation to continue to fulfil its purpose even during a disruption. Supporting this mission, I believe, are 5 values. Future ready. What do I mean by this? I mean your operation needs to be risk aware and have the flexibility required to adapt to unforeseen and unprecedented events. So work with your internal and external risk experts and ensure your planning is aligned with those risks. Enhanced readiness. This is all about intelligence-driven decision-making with the ability to rapidly understand a situation and mobilize the correct resources who are aware of their roles and responsibilities and whose skills have been developed through training and exercises. Exercising is by far the best way to highlight or focus on points which may need development in your planning and your preparation. Simultaneous events means having the skills, mindset, and surge capacity to respond to serious disruptive events in parallel. Ensure you have deputies for all of your crisis team members. Ensure they are fully trained. Ensure your crisis teams are manifestly ready to face the decision-making challenges of simultaneous events. Sustainable. ensuring that all you do enhances your operations capability, is embedded, is repeatable, and with minimal effort, and then will endure over a protracted period. There is no point having a solution which will hold for 2 weeks if the crisis runs for 2 years. Again, having crisis reviews and having forward-thinking teams who can analyse what is happening and project those best and worst case scenarios. And finally, learning fast. This means quickly identifying the lessons learned following significant events, transparently sharing critical information to enable better future decision-making, strengthening documentation, using specialised tools to foster collaboration and centralise information, and develop your team's resilience competencies. Oh, a tall order, you say, Peter. How are we going to deliver this? Well, the answer is by being present in the process. You have the tools, the BIAs, the recovery plans, the crisis teams. Train your stakeholders regularly. Develop that muscle memory. Check your critical third parties and ask them to do the same. Ensure your planning is up to date and aligned with your risks. When planning, use your imagination. Consider with your business owners how bad situations could get and how long bad could last. Remember, don't die from that lack of imagination. Challenge your RTO and your RPOs. All too often, these are business wishes rather than realistic requirements. Test your business as usual resilience configurations. Is that network, computer, server, power really fault tolerant? Switch one side off and see what happens. Oh, bold, you might say, but better that you do it when you are in the driving seat than when the crisis is. Ensure your IT department is up to date with its patching, that it's successfully completing meaningful backups that deliver efficient restoration at scale if needed. And oh yeah, test them regularly. It seems that as every day goes by, we're identifying new threats and risks. Unfortunately, these do not replace the existing ones, but are added layer on layer on an ever-lengthening list. However, don't be deterred, as many of your existing processes and solutions will resolve many situations if they are implemented correctly, regularly reviewed and updated, and most of all, tested. There is a reason they drill and exercise pilots, emergency services, and the armed services regularly. It's so they are ready. Be more ready. And finally, it's later than you think. I've heard crises described as swift and brutal audits, and I believe we all have parts of our programme which could do with improvement. Crises probe and challenge every defence that you have until they find a gap. This is a call to arms because it truly is later than you think. The next disaster which will rock your business is just around the corner, and it will no longer be a question of if, but when. And you know this. Make an effort, find your weak points and resolve them before some crisis finds them first. Challenge your assumptions. Confirm the response you expect is what you will get when an incident arises. Make sure your values are intact and in place. Be future ready. Enhance your readiness. Be ready for simultaneous events. Make sure your planning is sustainable and make sure you are ahead of the curve by learning fast. And finally, make sure you know everything about those distant lands so you don't get caught out. Thank you.